Renee the Dietitian, and welcome to Healthy Made Simple, where I show you how to make healthy eating simple. This is part 2 of my 3-part series where I'm showing you how I meal plan and meal prep for my family. In the second video of the series, I'm going to be showing you the meal prep portion of the series. And if you haven't already watched part 1, please make sure to check that out. In part 1, I showed you how I meal planned 5 healthy dinners that I'm going to be cooking up for the week. And in the second video of the series is going to be the meal prepping part. Now, when I say meal prepping, I don't mean cooking all these different meals in advance, putting them in individual containers to be used throughout the week. Instead, what I mean when I say meal prep is that I'm going to prep and cook ahead some components of my meals so that it makes it easier for me to date the day of. So for example, I'm going to be cooking ahead some vegetables, which is going to be the squash mix for this video. And I'm also going to be cooking some protein, which is going to be the raw ground turkey. And both of those items are going to be incorporated into multiple meals throughout the week. So by cooking them in advance, taking that, hour to 2 hour time window to get those 2 items prepped and cooked in advance helps give me options for cooked vegetables and cooked lean protein that I can use during the week. And it's not as time consuming compared to, having to cook the entire dish in advance and package it into different containers. So the fact that it only takes me 1 to 2 hours max to do this makes it more sustainable for me in the long run. So I want to show you how I do that so that hopefully it gives you an idea about how to meal prep in advance if, the traditional way of meal prepping doesn't really work for you, is too time consuming or just too much work for you. So this could be a nice alternative. So let's get going. Let me show you how I cooked up that bag of squash mix that I got from Costco, which was a large bag. It had about, 7 to 8 squash pieces in there. And I'm also going to be cooking up 1.5 pounds of ground turkey that are going to be incorporated into meals. So let's get going and I'll show you how I cook those 2 items. Alrighty, now looking back at my meal planner, these were the meals for the week. The ground turkey with the squash, so I'm going to need that turkey and squash for Monday. I'm going to also be needing the turkey and the squash for Wednesday. And I'm going to need that squash mix for Thursday's meal as well for the pasta. So the squash is going to be 3 meals. And I'm going to start by cutting up my squash. I'm just going to be chopping it up to be ready to get cooked. And then we'll do the turkey next. But the 2 components I'm cooking are going to be that squash and the turkey. The squash is going to get used up in 3 meals. So what I'm going to do is separate the squash into 1/3 and 2/3, because 2/3 is going to get cooked up with the turkey to be incorporated into meals, and another third I'm going to reserve to be mixed with the chicken for the pasta meal that I'm planning. Now, when I'm cooking up vegetables, in terms of chopping them up and cooking, if I'm doing cooking like this in advance, and then those meals, the components of the meals, for example, the squash, is going to get cooked again later. So, for example, I'm going to be reserving some of the squash to go into the pasta sauce to be used with my chicken and the pasta for that dish. And the rest of the squash is going to get cooked up with the turkey. So when I'm cooking it initially, I try not to overcook it too much. I try to just get to a point where it's just a little bit soft because I know it's going to be cooked further. With cooked vegetables, the more we cook them, the more nutrients we lose. So if we can eat them closer to the raw side, it's more nutrient retention. But of course, we have to think about what tastes good, right? Vegetables need to taste good in order for us to eat them. If it doesn't taste good, we're not going to eat it, so what's the point? Forcing yourself to eat something just because it's healthy for you is not my jam. So I try to make the food we eat nutritious and delicious at the same time. So for us, that means not eating zucchini, squash in its rawest form, but cook down more where it's going to be softer. And this meal that you're going to be seeing, you can honestly do this with any vegetable. It doesn't have to be squash. You can also do bell peppers, which I think would go well in this, or any other vegetable you enjoy that you want to just chop up into smaller size pieces to be incorporated. I just picked squash because we bought this big bag from Costco and we hadn't had squash in a while. And if you have picky people in your household, squash is an easy vegetable because it has a relatively mild flavor. Now, after I've chopped them all up, I'm going to cook it up. I'm going to use olive oil in my cooking, and I use olive oil for all the sauteing that I do. I'm going to go in with a relatively generous pour because we got a lot of squash to cook. Now, you're going to notice I'm going to do this in 2 phases, but first to flavor, I'm going to use this crushed frozen garlic, and I get these from Trader Joe's. They come in little cubes and they're frozen cubes with crushed garlic that you can just pop into your pan in order to be added in. And I use this very frequently because I love the flavor of garlic. We all do in our household, but it's a lot of work to crush and chop up garlic. And garlic powder just doesn't give the same flavor as fresh garlic in my opinion. So this is a great alternative for me that makes it easier to incorporate garlic. My only qualm about it is that my oil was hot here. So hot oil with frozen cubes does cause a lot of splatters. So maybe just be mindful of that. Might be helpful to maybe defrost it a little bit in advance, but I don't mind a little bit of splatter while I'm cooking. I can clean it up afterwards, but just letting you know to be mindful of that. Of course, if you can also add in some onions here, that would be great. I didn't have any on hand. Onions to me are a lot of work to chop up, so I try to avoid using onions unless I already buy them in pre-chopped form, whether it's fresh, and Trader Joe's does sell chopped up onions fresh. They don't last very long, but if you know you're going to be cooking, buy it maybe like a day or 2 before and it'll get you through all your cooking. Or you can also buy frozen chopped onions in the frozen aisle. It's not the same, I would say, but it does work in a pinch, especially if it's going to like just be incorporated into some sort of a sauce. You really can't tell the difference. Now I'm going to add in my first round of the chopped squash that I have and give that a good mix around so that it gets coated with the oil and the garlic that I threw in there. And then we're going to do some seasoning. Now, seasoning is a huge part of making healthy eating taste good. You gotta season, and you gotta find ways to season without having to use too much salt. I'm going to start out with a little bit of salt, and I do layer the salt as I go along. I do like to salt every component, but I try not to add in too much salt and rely on other seasonings like black pepper to add flavor to my dishes. And over time, we've gotten used to not using as much salt. Just a couple rounds of the couple turns of my salt shaker is typically what I go for versus, spoons of salt. I'm going to add in some garlic powder just to add more garlic flavor to it, even though I added in some of that crushed garlic to begin with, just to add more flavoring. And you just got to find what flavors you and your family enjoys and that you like to keep in your cabinet. The next item is Italian seasoning. We use this pretty frequently as well. It goes in almost every dish that I make. And that's generally my go-to with all of my spices and seasonings. I have kind of the core ones that we enjoy, and I incorporate that in everything pretty much. I may make changes here and there, but that just makes it easier for me to cook for the family for the week. Now, these are chopped onions. And to us, it's okay that it kind of uses the same seasonings over and over again. This is, a meal on a Tuesday night. I'm not trying to cook a Michelin-starred dish here. I'm just trying to feed my family some healthy dinners that they enjoy. And this is the last thing I like to add in, which is this everything seasoning from Flavor God. I got this from Costco, and this is a great all-around seasoning. This does have salt added, so keep that in mind. If you're adding salt in addition like I did, be sparingly with your salt, and keeping in mind that the everything seasoning that you added has salt to begin with. And if you wanted to do honestly just that seasoning and not even bother with all the other ones I showed you, it would still taste really good because it already has the salt mixed in, so you would probably just want to pour more of that in and it would be deliciously flavored squash zucchini mix, I'm sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toss all of those vegetables with the seasonings that we just had, and here comes my next batch. Now, if I had been smart about this, I would have done this in a bigger pot, so I didn't have to do it in 2 rounds like this, but I didn't really plan in advance, so I had to do this twice. I am going to add more olive oil on top to help coat that top layer. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my seasonings. I'm going to do the same round of seasonings as I did earlier to add in that flavor, to make sure everything is seasoned thoroughly, so that this is going to be a delicious zucchini squash dish for us to be able to incorporate. And you got to keep that in mind with vegetables. If vegetables are not something that you incorporate regularly, finding ways to flavor and season it, even if they may not be the healthiest of the seasonings. Maybe you have to add in more salt for now. Maybe you got to add in more dressing for now, more cheese on top for now, to make it palatable for you to eat in the long run. And I guarantee you, the more you eat vegetables, the more they're part of your everyday life, the more your body understands and appreciates it, and the more you become attuned to enjoying those flavors. And keep in mind, our flavors, our taste perception changes over time. Think back to when you were a kid, what you enjoyed then, the foods you enjoyed then versus what you enjoy now. You may find that some of the things that were your favorites when you were a kid may not be as an adult, and that's because our taste changes over time. So keep in mind that it's a process. If you need to start out with vegetables prepared in maybe not the healthiest ways, that's okay. You will get to a point where you will be able to make it healthier. But don't get discouraged if you're trying to eat lots of raw vegetables and you're not enjoying it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this healthy eating business is not for me. I can't eat like this. It's okay. I can't eat like that either, which is why I show you videos like this where you can do cooked vegetables or other vegetables that taste good, so that you can actually stick to it in the long run. But vegetable intake, what matters is that you get it in daily, in whatever form it needs to be in. But the fact that you're eating vegetables is significantly more important than not eating the vegetable. Does that make sense? All right, so don't be discouraged. Now, looks like my squash is almost done. I've just been cooking it up, and I've been working on other things on the side while this is cooking up. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the consistency I'm going for is that I want it to be soft, but I don't want it to be mushy. And that's about right where I got to. And here is my final finished squash. Now I'm going to take 1/3 of this, which is going to be incorporated into my pasta sauce for that pasta dish, which is going to be the chicken, the squash mix, pasta sauce, and my pasta. So I'm going to reserve a bowl of that, about 1/3 of this mix. And you'll notice there's a lot of water at the bottom of my dish of the cooked squash. And that's because squash and zucchini have a higher water content. So when you cook it, that water does leak. Now I'm not going to throw away that water at the bottom. I'm actually going to keep it and reserve it because it helps add moisture to it, especially because I know the squash, the rest of the squash, once it gets cooked up with the ground turkey, one of the dishes it's going to be incorporated in is going to be and there's my cooked squash that I'm going to reserve on the side for my pasta. But the squash is going to be incorporated, the rest of it, into a rice bowl. So it's going to be good to have some sort of a moisture in there. So I'm going to keep the water that's in there. Maybe if there was a little bit of extra, I may throw it out. All right, here is that final bowl of the cooked squash. So I'm going to keep that on the side, and I'm going to work on the ground turkey next. And again, I'm going in with my olive oil to cook up my ground turkey. And here is the ground turkey. This is organic. It's 1.5 pounds. As I mentioned previously, we buy the turkey organic for home because I tend to make meatballs with this turkey for my son more often than actually cook it for us. And just because he's little, I like to buy organic for him if I can. Honestly, if I was just cooking this for me and my husband, I would probably just go for a regular good old turkey, whatever was the most affordable at the store at the time. And with my turkey, as I'm cooking it, I'm seasoning it with just salt and pepper, the same seasonings that I used for my zucchini. So that was garlic powder that I just threw in there. And then next is going to be the chopped onions. These are chopped onion flakes, and I get this from a big container from Costco as well. And the Italian seasoning, that's going to go in there, the same flavoring, so it all just blends together nicely, and it's nice, simple flavors that can really go with any dish, because this ground turkey is going to be part of two of the dishes that I'm going to be making. The first one being that rice bowl that I told you about, and the second one is going to be a taco. Now that's where I'm a little bit concerned about how watery my zucchini turned out. I'm not sure how that's going to go in a taco format, so I may need to drain it a little bit for that purpose. But for now, I'm going to reserve that zucchini water in there as I'm going to cook it with my ground turkey. And again, with ground turkey, I just have the heat up, and I'm just going to pound it until it's ground turkey. If you're not great with cooking, the one additional thing I'm going to add here is paprika. I do love how paprika goes in cooked ground meat. I think it just adds a really nice flavor to it and a nice color to it as well, especially since ground turkey can be a little drab colored. Not that color really matters in terms of protein, but we eat with our eyes too, right? We want the food to look good as well, and sometimes our eyes make decisions before our brain can think when it comes to food. So it's good to try to make the food visually appealing to you as well. Healthy food visually appealing to you as well, so that you want to eat it. All right, my ground turkey is really coming along here, and I'm just going to keep going until it looks relatively cooked through. All those juices that were seeping out have kind of been absorbed back up. And then once that's done, I'm going to add in my zucchini. Now this is a trick I use all the time to mix together my ground meat with some vegetables. One, it adds more bulk, so you're going to get a bigger portion out of the whole thing. Two, it helps to add in more vegetables. A lot of times I'm able to add in raw vegetables on the side in terms of salad kits, but cooked vegetables are a little bit harder to incorporate. So if it's already mixed in with the meat and cooked in, it kind of makes it easier because it's already all one component. And you can do this with honestly any ground meat and any vegetable, as I mentioned, just to create different mixes and different varieties that you enjoy in order to increase your vegetable intake. And it looks like this is coming along pretty well. You can see it's pretty watery in there. So when it comes time for that taco, I think I probably need to drain that out a little bit. I do realize that, but I think this will be great for my bowl because it's going to add a little bit more moisture in there, because it's mainly just going to be rice and this mixture that you're seeing. And I'll probably add some other flavorings on top to make it more yummy. But this is just a basic way of cooking a protein and a vegetable in order to incorporate it for meals throughout the week. And I'm just going to add some extra salt on top just to make sure everything is seasoned through. And of course, if you're trying to follow a low sodium diet, you can always skip on the added salt on top. You can skip on the salt in general and just use more of the salt-free seasonings as well in order to make it healthier choices. But if you're not as concerned about salt when you're cooking at home, just adding a little bit more salt to make it a little bit more flavorful so that you enjoy the taste of this healthy food is going to go a long way, because our goal here is consistency, finding ways of healthy eating that we can stay consistent with in the long run, because that is going to make the biggest impact on our health. And here's what I ended up with. This is a relatively large container of my turkey and squash mix, and this is going to be 2 meals for us. So I'll probably just split that down the half in order to use it into 2 separate meals. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helped give you an idea about how you can meal prep some vegetables and some protein in advance so that it can be incorporated into multiple meals throughout the week, and how you can use just basic cooking skills to do that. You don't necessarily need recipes, you just need to have a basic understanding of how to cook up some vegetables, how to cook up some protein, and then what spices, flavorings, herbs you enjoy, you and your family of course enjoys. Now, the ones I showed you are pretty basic, simple ones that are relatively mild flavors that we use around the house. We have a toddler as well, so I try to keep the flavorings to ones that are going to be pleasing for all of us. So it might just be a trial and error for you to find out what works for you, what works for the people that you cook for in your household, to find ways to prep items in advance that are going to be incorporated into meals, and doing it in a way where it's not so time consuming, where you have to hunt down a bunch of recipes and get all these different ingredients, but that you can just easily do with some basic cooking skills. All right, I hope this was a helpful video. Please stay tuned for the last part of the series, which is going to be part 3. And in part 3, I'm going to be showing you those 5 healthy dinners that we've been working on this whole time. I'm going to show you how each one of them turned out, and also what type of cooking I had to do the day of in order to get those meals together. Of course, these 2 components that we cooked today are only just going to be components of the meals, and I'm going to have to do some prepping the day of, but this is going to save me so much time when that day comes around. Alrighty, thank you so much for following Healthy Made Simple. I hope this channel helps give you ideas about how to make healthy eating simple for you. If you like the content that I produce, please hit that subscribe button to help my channel grow, and make sure to be on the lookout for any future videos. Again, thank you so much for staying tuned, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.